Howdy, everybody. What I wanted to do was give you an additional word on fonts from Chapter 5 here. Now, there are videos with the textbook involved when we're talking about how to use technically fonts on your web pages. What I wanted to do with this was explain to you kind of the difference between the way the textbook relies on fonts and the way that you as a web developer should rely on fonts. The problem or challenge with the way the textbook identifies changing font faces, font colors, font weights, font families, all of that stuff, is that one critical thing it relies on is your device. So this thing here that I'm looking at, this thing here that I'm recording onto, this thing here, which is buzzing incessantly today, that is a problem. So were we on campus, were we downstairs on campus, and if I was looking from the middle of the WTC, right, the Woodward Technology Center, if I stood just in the foyer and said, here in every direction, we've got a lot of different machines in there, right? So we would have a Mac lab in front of me, and that Mac lab would have a bunch of Adobe software on there. So that means they would have gigabytes worth of additional font caches, new fancy fonts to be able to use. So you could get hyper technical with that stuff. What's the kern, the amount of space in between the, one letter to the next, all that stuff we won't do. Don't worry, that you can explore that a little bit through the text, and I leave that there for you to read through. But that's all true of the Macs there. Now, if we go immediately to the right or to the left of that Mac lab in WTC, we have two general purpose Windows PC labs, right? Actually, one of them is Windows 10. The other one is Windows 7. And who knows what kind of fonts are on there. It's whatever comes with the default standard load for whatever programs are installed there. Now, the way the textbook relies on font choices for you, the developer, is to actually rely on these, the device. And the problem with that is you don't know what fonts are available to this particular device. Now, I'm pointing at an iPad now, recording me, and we actually have a pretty good idea of all the fonts available to an iPad. But the problem is, for your unknown potential future client, when they go to their machines, what do they have loaded? Do they have a ton of Adobe software? Do they have a brand new machine that has never been booted up before? Who knows? So rather than rely on chance, what I suggest to you is don't. Let's rely instead on the internet. What we're going to look at now is the Google Font Library, which used to be something that people had to pay for. Google bought the font library there, and they actually published it for everybody to use. Once upon a time, you actually used to have to pay for font faces that you wanted to use. I am glad that those days are over. The advantage of the Google Font Library is, if you have access to the internet, you have access to the Google Font Library. And if you're looking to load a web page, it means you need the internet, which means if you can load a web page, you can load the Google Font Library. So that gives you, as the web designer, that gives you a very, very granular, very small, very particular control over all of those aspects of your pages. So we're going to go switch over, and we're going to look at the Google Font Library. So here we are at fonts.google.com. This is free and available to everyone. Sooner or later, down the road, when you are more accustomed to design in the web and some of those other ancillary concerns, like what kinds of fonts should we be looking at here? Maybe you can use the search as is right here, so that you can get right to the font that you want. But for the time being, I say, the heck with it. Let's look around. So fonts.google.com is an online library of just thousands of fonts that are available to you, the web developer, to be able to come through here, select a font, and automatically include it when your web page is loaded on your unknown potential future client's machine by virtue of this library existing on the internet. So we're going to see what that looks like. So if I scroll down through here, again, this is just fonts.google.com, and I will leave the link to that in the course shell for you. You can see the name of the font, so Corona 1, Open Sans, Lato. You can see who developed it, which I think is great for those designers. And you can see a preview of what the font is going to look like. So, like the video from the text says, there are essentially two kinds of fonts: serif fonts and sans serif fonts. The sans serif fonts do not have the little feet. So feet must be Greek for serif or something, right? So there's no little guide lines essentially here. A serif font would have, like Roboto Mono has here, it has, these little pieces of legs essentially on them, right? So the thought used to be that it was easier for your eyes to track left to right, up to down across a page if your eyes were given guidelines. So the serif on those fonts were there so that your eyes could more easily track. That turns out to be a good theory, but it turns out it's about a wash. So the best advice now is pick 1 or 2 or 3 font faces, font families that you like, and try to stick to that. Don't go crazy in putting like 7 different font families or font faces in your web pages. It's just too much. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on Roboto, which is actually a Google-made font, I believe. So you can see that there's a whole bunch of different styles here to this. So essentially that means thin, thick, light, etc. And we're going to click over here on Download Family. We can actually go ahead and download the whole thing. So this is going to mean that we need to include, that file with our HTML and with our CSS, and that turns out not to be the most optimal way to do this. What we really want to do is just to be able to embed these in our, or import them rather, in our CSS and be able to use them from there. So we're looking for something a little more flexible than going to download the entire font family. So what we want to do is make a selection that we can just import. So what I'm going to do is come back through Roboto. I'll click on it this time. Here on the right-hand side is select this style. So I'm actually going to come grab Light 300 and click on select this style. You can see that something has happened. It says remove style now as opposed to select this style. Let's add another one. I'm going to come back down for this Corona one because it sounds like Corona and I'm getting hungry. So there's the font face, the way it looks. So I'm going to click on select this style again, and up here in the upper right of your page, you'll see view your selected families. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So here's the 2 selections I made. Remember, it was Roboto Light 300. It was Corona 1 with regular 400. And what I can do is, instead of downloading these, I can click on embed. And here's the link. Here's the @ import. The at import is really what you want to use, because rather than linking to these via your HTML, we want to include this as an import statement in your CSS. So let's see what that would look like. I'm going to copy everything in between these two style tags. Now, if we had a page with inline or embedded style, which is not optimal for us, we could include these style tags. But honestly, if I just rock over here to brackets, you'll notice over here on the left-hand side, I have my CSS. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of space at the top, and I'm going to paste that in. Now, I accidentally grabbed the opening bracket here, so the opening, I'm going to get rid of that piece of the tag. Now, my at import is going to go ahead and grab those two fonts when this CSS is loaded. Now, the at import statements always have to go at the very top of your CSS document. You can have multiple at import statements, they just have to go here at the top. What this statement is doing, it's telling the page where to locate. So this page, this HTML page, or any other page that is connected to this CSS, it is telling where to grab these font families from. So from here on out, if I rock back over here to, well, in this case it's Brave was the browser I was using, I could say font face or font family instead of, you know, Times New Roman or whatever else I was doing. I could just say font face Chrono 1 there, just like this, or font face Roboto, just like this, and then I can use that font. This is far better than, you know, like we see the font family here. So this is just the main and the the main.css and the index.html that came with brackets. This is relying on Helvetica Neue, which is hopefully built into this system. Can I prove that it is? Maybe. Do I need to prove that it is? No. If instead of Helvetica Neue like this, I put in Chrono 1 right in here, that would work instead. So fonts.google.com is, for you, the developer, infinitely preferable than relying and hoping that you can rely on your unknown potential future client's device to store all of those unknown font faces for you. Fonts.google.com is a great inclusion in your web developers toolkit.